The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the endless stretch of desert sand as 3 United States Marines found themselves miles away from civilization. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, Corporal Jake Rodriguez, and Private First Class David Chen had been on a routine reconnaissance mission in the remote Nevada desert when everything went terribly wrong. Their mission was supposed to be simple. They were tasked with surveying potential locations for a new military training facility that would be funded by wealthy defense contractors. The project was worth millions of dollars, and several billionaire investors were competing for the lucrative government contract. Among them was Vincent Blackwood, a ruthless businessman known for his cutthroat tactics and questionable ethics in securing military deals. The Marines had been dropped off at dawn by helicopter with enough supplies for a 3-day operation. They carried GPS devices, communication equipment, water, food, and emergency gear. Their job was to map the terrain, take photographs, and report back on the suitability of various locations for the proposed facility. Everything seemed normal during the first 2 days. The Marines methodically covered their assigned areas, documenting everything as required. They maintained regular contact with their base, reporting their progress and location updates every few hours. The desert was harsh, but they were well-trained and experienced soldiers who had faced much worse conditions during their overseas deployments. On the 3rd morning, something felt different. Their communication equipment began experiencing strange interference. The GPS devices started giving conflicting readings, and their radio contact with the base became sporadic and filled with static. Initially, they attributed these problems to solar activity or equipment malfunction, common issues in remote desert operations. Unknown to the 3 Marines, they were being watched. Hidden cameras had been monitoring their every move since they arrived. Vincent Blackwood had invested heavily in surveillance technology and had deployed a team of private contractors to keep tabs on the military survey. He knew that if the Marines recommended certain locations over others, it could cost him the multi-million-dollar contract he desperately wanted. Blackwood had built his fortune through questionable means, often eliminating competition through intimidation, sabotage, and worse. He had connections in high places and wasn't afraid to use them. His reputation in the defense industry was built on fear and respect in equal measure. Those who crossed him often found themselves facing mysterious accidents or sudden financial ruin. As the Marines continued their survey work, they began noticing signs that they weren't alone in the desert. Fresh tire tracks appeared overnight, and they occasionally caught glimpses of distant vehicles on the horizon. Their trained instincts told them something was wrong, but they had no idea how dangerous their situation was about to become. The interference with their equipment was no accident. Blackwood's team was using sophisticated jamming devices to disrupt their communications and GPS signals. The plan was to isolate the Marines and force them into a situation where they would have no choice but to cooperate with Blackwood's demands or face the consequences. On the evening of their 3rd day, as the Marines prepared to establish their final camp before the scheduled pickup the next morning, they received a disturbing radio transmission. The voice was distorted and barely audible through the static, but the message was clear. Their extraction had been postponed indefinitely due to equipment failures at the base. The 3 soldiers looked at each other with growing concern. In all their years of service, they had never experienced such a complete breakdown of communication and support systems. Thompson, the senior officer, made the decision to conserve their remaining supplies and prepare for an extended stay in the desert while they tried to re-establish contact with their command. That night, as they took turns on watch duty, strange lights appeared in the distance. Vehicles were moving across the desert under cover of darkness, and it became clear that whoever was out there was deliberately avoiding contact with them. The Marines prepared their weapons and established defensive positions, but the mysterious vehicles maintained their distance. As dawn broke on what should have been their pickup day, the Marines discovered that their situation had become even more dire. During the night, someone had tampered with their remaining equipment. Their backup radio was destroyed, their emergency beacon was missing, and several critical supplies had been stolen from their packs. The realization hit them like a punch to the gut. They were trapped in the middle of nowhere, cut off from all communication with limited supplies and no way to signal for help. Someone wanted them isolated and vulnerable, but they had no idea who or why. In the distance, a German shepherd dog appeared on a rocky outcrop, watching them intently. The animal seemed out of place in the harsh desert environment, and its presence added another layer of mystery to their already confusing situation. Little did they know that this loyal dog would soon become their only hope for survival in the deadly game that Vincent Blackwood was playing. The fourth day in the desert brought with it a sense of growing desperation for the three Marines. Their water supplies were running dangerously low, and the extreme heat was taking its toll on their bodies. Staff Sergeant Thompson had rationed their remaining food and water, but by his calculations, they had maybe 2 days left before dehydration would seriously compromise their ability to function. Corporal Rodriguez spent hours trying to repair their damaged communication equipment, using every trick he had learned in electronics training. His fingers worked methodically through the tangled wires and circuits, but whoever had sabotaged their gear had done a thorough job. Every critical component seemed to have been either destroyed or removed with surgical precision. Private Chen kept watch from a high vantage point, using binoculars to scan the surrounding desert for any sign of rescue or threat. The German shepherd they had spotted the day before continued to appear at various locations around their camp, always maintaining a safe distance but never leaving the area completely. The dog appeared well-fed and healthy, which was strange for an animal surviving alone in such harsh conditions. As the morning sun climbed higher, Chen spotted something that made his blood run cold. A convoy of 3 black SUVs was approaching their position across the desert floor, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. These weren't military vehicles, and they certainly weren't a rescue party. The cars moved with purpose and coordination that suggested military or paramilitary training. Thompson quickly organized his men into defensive positions among the rocky outcrops that surrounded their camp. They had limited ammunition and no heavy weapons, but they were Marines, and they would fight with everything they had if necessary. The approaching vehicle stopped about half a mile away, just outside effective rifle range. A figure emerged from the lead vehicle carrying a white flag and a megaphone. The man was dressed in expensive desert camouflage and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. When he spoke through the megaphone, his voice carried clearly across the desert air with an unmistakably arrogant tone. "Marines, I know you can hear me. My name is Vincent Blackwood, and I have a proposition for you. Your government has abandoned you out here, and your rescue isn't coming. I can offer you food, water, and safe transport out of this desert, but I need something in return." Thompson felt his jaw clench as he recognized the name. Vincent Blackwood was notorious in military circles as a defense contractor who played dirty to win government contracts. Stories circulated about competitors who had mysteriously lost bids after encountering problems with their proposals or key personnel. The billionaire continued his address. "I know you've been surveying this area for the new training facility. I need you to modify your reports to recommend the locations that favor my development proposal. It's a simple request and everyone benefits. You get to go home safely, and I get the contract that should have been mine anyway," Rodriguez whispered angrily to Thompson. "This guy's completely insane if he thinks we're going to falsify official military reports for his profit." Chen nodded in agreement, his rifle trained on the distant figure with the megaphone. Thompson stood up partially from behind his cover and shouted back, "Mr. Blackwood, we're United States Marines. We don't negotiate with civilians who interfere with military operations. Leave this area immediately or we'll consider you a hostile threat." Blackwood's laughter echoed across the desert. "Sergeant Thompson, you're not in a position to make demands. Look around you. You're miles from help, your equipment is destroyed, and you're running out of supplies. I'm offering you a chance to walk away from this situation alive and with your careers intact." The billionaire gestured to his men, and several armed figures emerged from the vehicles. They were clearly professional soldiers or mercenaries, equipped with military-grade weapons and gear. The message was unmistakable. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. "I'm giving you until sunset to consider my offer," Blackwood announced. "After that, I'll have to explore other options for persuading you to see reason. And trust me, gentlemen, you won't enjoy those alternatives." The convoy withdrew to a safe distance but remained visible on the horizon, a constant reminder of the threat they represented. The Marines were effectively under siege, cut off from help and facing an enemy with superior numbers and resources. As the day wore on, the situation became increasingly desperate. Their water reserves continued to dwindle, and the psychological pressure of being trapped was affecting all three men. They took turns trying to find ways to signal for help or escape the area. But Blackwood's men had positioned themselves to cut off all possible escape routes. The German Shepherd appeared again, this time much closer to their position. The dog seemed agitated and kept looking back toward a distant ridge as if trying to communicate something important. Chen noticed that the animal wore a collar, suggesting it belonged to someone, but there were no visible identification tags. During a brief moment when the dog approached their position, Rodriguez managed to get close enough to examine it more carefully. Hidden beneath the thick fur around the collar, he discovered something unexpected, a small GPS tracking device and what appeared to be a miniature camera. Someone had been using this dog to monitor the area, but who? The discovery added another layer of complexity to their situation. Was the dog working for Blackwood, providing him with intelligence about their movements and conversations? Or could it belong to someone else entirely, someone who might be their only hope for rescue? As sunset approached, Thompson gathered his men to discuss their options. They could surrender to Blackwood and compromise their integrity as Marines. They could fight and likely die in the desert, or they could try to find a third alternative that none of them had thought of yet. The German Shepherd sat on a nearby rock, watching them intently as if understanding the gravity of their situation. Its presence had become a constant throughout their ordeal, and Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that the animal was trying to tell them something important. The question was whether they would figure out what that message was before Blackwood's deadline expired, and their situation became even more dangerous. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, Vincent Blackwood's deadline loomed over the three trapped Marines like a death sentence. The billionaire's convoy had remained visible throughout the day, a constant reminder of the impossible choice they faced: compromise their honor, or face the consequences of defying a man who had built his empire on the destruction of those who opposed him. Staff Sergeant Thompson sat in the sparse shade of a boulder, staring at the modified survey reports that Blackwood had demanded. The papers had been delivered by one of the mercenaries during the afternoon, along with detailed instructions on exactly how the Marines were expected to falsify their official findings. The documents were professionally prepared, suggesting that Blackwood had been planning this operation for weeks or even months. The modifications were subtle but significant. Blackwood wanted the Marines to recommend locations that would give his company exclusive access to valuable mineral deposits hidden beneath the desert floor. Intelligence reports had recently revealed that the area contained rare earth elements worth hundreds of millions of dollars, information that wasn't supposed to be known outside of classified military circles. Corporal Rodriguez had spent the afternoon working on their destroyed communication equipment with desperate determination. His hands were cut and bleeding from handling the sharp metal fragments, but he refused to give up. Every wire he repaired seemed to lead to another damaged component, and it was becoming clear that the sabotage had been carried out by someone with extensive knowledge of military communication systems. Private Chen maintained his watch position, but his attention was increasingly drawn to the mysterious German Shepherd that continued to circle their camp. The dog's behavior had become more agitated as the day progressed, and it seemed to be trying to lead them toward a specific area of the desert. Several times, the animal had approached their position, barked softly, and then retreated in the direction of a distant ridge. The discovery of the GPS tracker and camera on the dog had raised troubling questions about who else might be involved in their situation. Thompson had ordered his men to assume that all their conversations were being monitored, forcing them to communicate through hand signals and written notes when discussing sensitive topics. As the shadows grew longer, Blackwood's voice once again echoed across the desert through his megaphone. "Gentlemen, the sun is getting low and my patience is running thin. I trust you've had time to review the documents and understand what I'm asking for. This is your final opportunity to make the smart choice." Thompson stood up and walked to the edge of their defensive position. His throat was parched from dehydration, but his voice carried clearly as he shouted back, "Mr. Blackwood, our answer remains the same. United States Marines don't falsify official reports for anyone, regardless of the consequences." The billionaire's response was immediate and chilling. "Very well, Sergeant. You've made your choice and now you'll live with the results. Or perhaps I should say, you won't live with them. Blackwood gestured to his men and the Marines watched in growing alarm as the mercenaries began unloading heavy equipment from their vehicles. Spotlights, generators, and what appeared to be advanced surveillance gear were being set up in a perimeter around their position. It was clear that Blackwood was preparing for an extended siege. Since you won't cooperate willingly, Blackwood announced, I'll simply have to wait until dehydration and exposure change your minds. My men will ensure that you don't leave this area, and eventually, you'll be grateful for any water I'm willing to provide in exchange for your signature on those documents. The psychological warfare was beginning to take its toll. Chen was the youngest of the three Marines, and Thompson could see the fear in his eyes as their situation became increasingly hopeless. Rodriguez remained focused on his repair work, but even his steady hands were beginning to shake from the stress and dehydration. As darkness fell, the mercenaries activated their spotlights, turning the Marines' position into a brightly lit prison. The harsh white light eliminated any possibility of movement under cover of darkness and would make sleep nearly impossible. Blackwood had clearly planned every aspect of his psychological assault. The German Shepherd appeared again, this time staying just outside the circle of light. The dog's behavior had changed dramatically. Instead of the calm observation they had noticed before, the animal now appeared highly agitated and kept looking back toward the ridge as if expecting something or someone to appear. During a brief moment when the spotlights swept away from their position, Rodriguez managed to get Thompson's attention and pointed toward the dog. Using hand signals, he indicated that he had noticed a pattern in the animal's movements. The dog wasn't just randomly wandering around their camp. It was following a specific route that seemed to correspond with areas where the mercenaries' surveillance was weakest. Thompson began to wonder if the German Shepherd might be their unexpected ally rather than another tool of Blackwood's surveillance network. The dog's agitation suggested that it was trying to communicate something urgent, and its consistent attempts to draw their attention toward the distant ridge might be significant. Throughout the night, the mercenaries maintained their watch, taking shifts to ensure that the Marines remained trapped in their illuminated prison. Blackwood had withdrawn to a comfortable command post set up near his vehicles, complete with air conditioning and communication equipment that connected him to resources far beyond what the trapped Marines could imagine. The billionaire's plan was working perfectly. The Marines were growing weaker with each passing hour, their water supplies nearly exhausted and their options rapidly disappearing. By morning, Blackwood was confident that even the most stubborn military pride would give way to the basic human need for survival. But the German Shepherd had other plans. As the night wore on, the dog's behavior became increasingly bold. It began approaching closer to the Marines' position, always staying just outside the reach of the spotlights but making it clear that it wanted their attention. The animal's persistence suggested that time was running out for something more than just the Marines' water supplies. Thompson made a decision that would change everything. Despite the risk of revealing their intentions to Blackwood's surveillance equipment, he decided to follow the dog's lead and see where it was trying to take them. The animal might be their only hope for escape, and desperate situations called for desperate measures. The German Shepherd seemed to sense Thompson's decision and began moving more deliberately toward the ridge, pausing frequently to ensure that the Marines understood they were supposed to follow. Whatever the dog was trying to show them, it was urgent enough that the animal was willing to risk exposure to the mercenaries' weapons and surveillance equipment. In the pre-dawn darkness, as Vincent Blackwood's mercenaries maintained their vigilant watch over the trapped Marines, the German Shepherd made its most daring approach yet. The dog had been circling closer to their position throughout the night, and now it seemed determined to make contact regardless of the danger. Staff Sergeant Thompson had been observing the animal's behavior with growing fascination. The dog's movements were too deliberate and purposeful to be random. Every approach followed the same pattern. The animal would appear at the edge of the spotlight's reach, catch the attention of one of the Marines, and then retreat toward the distant ridge while looking back to see if they were following. During a brief moment when the mercenaries' attention was focused elsewhere, the German Shepherd darted into their camp and dropped something at Thompson's feet, before quickly retreating to safety. The object was a small waterproof pouch, carefully sealed and obviously placed there intentionally. Thompson's hands trembled as he opened the pouch, being careful to shield his actions from the surveillance cameras. Inside, he found a handwritten note, a detailed map of the area, and a small electronic device he didn't immediately recognize. The note was brief but filled with hope. Follow Rex at 0400 hours. Underground passage leads to safety. Water and supplies waiting. Trust the dog. Colonel James Harrison, U.S. Army Intelligence. The Marines exchanged glances of amazement and relief. Colonel Harrison was a legendary figure in military intelligence circles, known for his unconventional operations and his ability to gather information in the most dangerous situations. If Harrison was involved, it meant that their situation hadn't gone unnoticed by higher authorities. The map showed a complex network of underground tunnels and caves that honeycombed the area beneath the desert floor. Many of these passages were natural formations created by ancient water flows, while others had been carved out during old mining operations decades earlier. Most importantly, the map showed a route that would take them far from Blackwood's surveillance. Perimeter, the electronic device, turned out to be a sophisticated GPS locator that would guide them through the underground passages to predetermined supply caches. Harrison had obviously been planning this rescue operation for some time, using Rex, his specially trained German Shepherd, as the key to making contact with the trapped Marines. As 4 a.m. approached, Thompson quietly briefed his men on the escape plan. They would have to move during the brief period when the mercenaries changed shifts, using the darkness between the sweeping spotlights to reach the entrance to the underground passage that Rex would show them. The German Shepherd, whose name they now knew was Rex, appeared exactly at the appointed time. The dog's behavior had changed completely. Gone was the agitated pacing and uncertainty. Rex now moved with military precision, clearly understanding his mission and the critical timing required for success. Entrance to the underground passage was hidden beneath a carefully camouflaged section of desert floor about 200 yards from their camp. Rex led them through a maze of boulders and scrub brush, always staying in the shadows and avoiding the areas covered by Blackwood's surveillance equipment. Thompson marveled at the dog's intelligence and training as Rex guided them through the treacherous terrain. The animal seemed to know exactly where every camera was positioned and how to avoid the motion sensors that Blackwood's men had deployed around the perimeter. This wasn't just a smart dog. This was a highly trained military working animal with specialized skills. The passage entrance was a narrow opening between 2 large rocks that would have been nearly impossible to find without Rex's guidance. The dog disappeared into the darkness first, then returned to encourage the Marines to follow. Thompson went first, followed by Rodriguez and Chen, with Rex bringing up the rear to ensure that no one was left behind. The underground tunnel was larger than they had expected, carved out of solid rock by generations of water flow. Emergency lighting had been installed along the walls, powered by battery packs that were obviously part of Colonel Harrison's preparation for this operation. The air was cool and humid, a welcome relief from the desert heat above. Rex moved through the tunnels with confident familiarity, leading them through a complex network of passages that branched and rejoined in patterns that would have been impossible to navigate without a guide. The dog stopped at regular intervals to ensure that the Marines were keeping up and to check the GPS device that Thompson carried. After what seemed like hours of underground travel, they reached the first supply cache that Colonel Harrison had established. Hidden in a carefully concealed side chamber, they found water, food, medical supplies, and communication equipment. Most importantly, they found a detailed briefing document that explained the full scope of Vincent Blackwood's illegal operation. According to Harrison's intelligence, Blackwood had been systematically targeting military survey teams and defense contract competitions for over 2 years. The billionaire had assembled a network of corrupt officials, hired mercenaries, and advanced surveillance technology to eliminate competition and secure lucrative government contracts through intimidation and fraud. The document revealed that Thompson's team wasn't the first group of Marines to face Blackwood's threats. 2 previous survey teams had been forced to modify their reports under similar circumstances, and one team that had refused to cooperate had suffered a mysterious helicopter crash that was officially blamed on mechanical failure. Rex sat patiently while the Marines read through the intelligence briefing and resupplied themselves with water and food. The dog's calm demeanor suggested that they were safe in the underground chamber, at least temporarily. But Thompson knew that Blackwood would eventually discover their escape and begin searching for them with increased desperation. The communication equipment in the cache allowed Thompson to make contact with Colonel Harrison for the first time. The conversation was brief and coded, but the message was clear. Harrison had been building a case against Blackwood for months, and the Marine's testimony would provide the final evidence needed to bring the billionaire to justice. Rex will guide you to the final extraction point. Harrison's voice crackled through the encrypted radio. Stay in the tunnels until you reach the coordinates I've provided. My team will be waiting there with full support and protection. And Sergeant Thompson, thank you for refusing to compromise your integrity. Your courage is going to bring down one of the most dangerous criminals in the defense industry. Rex seemed to understand that it was time to move again. The dog stood up and walked toward another passage that led deeper into the underground network. The Marines gathered their supplies and prepared to continue their journey toward safety. But they knew that Vincent Blackwood wouldn't give up easily. Above ground, the billionaire's mercenaries were probably discovering that their prisoners had vanished. Blackwood's rage would be terrible, and he would use every resource at his disposal to recapture them before they could expose his criminal operation. The race was on, and Rex was their only guide through the dangerous maze that lay between them and freedom. The underground tunnels echoed with the sounds of pursuit, as Marcus Kane's mercenaries closed in on Staff Sergeant Thompson and Corporal Rodriguez. The two Marines had successfully drawn most of Blackwood's men away from Private Chen and Rex, but their diversionary tactics had come at a steep price. They were now trapped in a section of the tunnel network with limited escape routes and dwindling ammunition. Thompson checked his watch and calculated that Chen and Rex should be nearing the extraction point if everything had gone according to Colonel Harrison's plan. Every minute that he and Rodriguez could delay Kane's team increased the chances that their youngest teammate would reach safety with the critical evidence needed to bring down Vincent Blackwood's criminal. Operation Rodriguez had found a defensive position behind some old mining equipment where he could monitor multiple tunnel entrances with his rifle. The corporal's electronics training had proved invaluable throughout their ordeal, and now his marksmanship skills would be put to the ultimate test. Both Marines knew they were likely facing their final battle, but their military training and sense of duty drove them to fight with everything they had. Miles away, Private Chen followed Rex through increasingly treacherous terrain as they climbed toward the surface through passages that hadn't been used in decades. The young Marine's pack contained documents, photographs, and recorded conversations that proved Blackwood's systematic corruption of military contracts and his threats against personnel who refused to cooperate with his schemes. Rex seemed to sense that they were approaching their destination. The German shepherd's pace had increased, and his behavior showed the focused intensity of a military working dog completing a critical mission. The animal had been trained for exactly this type of operation, and his performance throughout their escape had been nothing short of extraordinary. The extraction point was located in a hidden canyon that provided natural cover from aerial surveillance while offering multiple escape routes in case of enemy contact. Colonel Harrison had chosen the location carefully, using his years of experience in covert operations to select a site that would give his rescue team every possible advantage. As Rex led Chen up a steep passage toward the surface, the sounds of gunfire began echoing through the tunnels behind them. Thompson and Rodriguez had made contact with Kane's mercenaries, and the battle for their lives had begun. Chen felt a surge of guilt about leaving his teammates behind, but he knew that completing the mission was more important than his personal feelings. Rex emerged from the tunnel entrance first, scanning the area for threats before signaling that it was safe for Chen to follow. The young Marine found himself in a narrow ravine surrounded by towering rock formations that provided excellent concealment. Hidden among the rocks, he could see the silhouettes of armed figures who were obviously part of Colonel Harrison's rescue team. A tall figure in desert camouflage stepped out from behind a boulder, and Chen immediately recognized the legendary Colonel Harrison from photographs he had seen in military publications. The intelligence officer moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades operating in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Private Chen, welcome to freedom, Harrison said quietly, extending his hand in greeting. Rex has done an outstanding job getting you here safely. Now we need to get you and that evidence to a secure location where you can provide testimony that will put Vincent Blackwood behind bars for the rest of his life. Rex trotted over to Harrison and sat at attention, clearly pleased to have completed his mission successfully. The German Shepherd had navigated through miles of underground passages, avoided multiple enemy patrols, and delivered his human cargo exactly where he was supposed to. It was a performance that would have made any military trainer proud. Harrison's rescue team consisted of 6 highly trained specialty operations soldiers who had been monitoring Blackwood's activities for months while building a comprehensive case against the billionaire. They had communication equipment that allowed them to coordinate with federal law enforcement agencies and military command structures that Blackwood couldn't corrupt or intimidate. What about Thompson and Rodriguez? Chen asked anxiously. They stayed behind to give us time to escape. But Kane's men were closing in on their position when I left. Harrison's expression grew serious as he listened to the distant sounds of gunfire echoing up from the underground tunnels. We have teams moving in to extract your teammates, but the situation is complicated. Kane's mercenaries are well-equipped and highly trained, and they're fighting with the desperation of men who know they'll face serious prison time if they're captured. The colonel activated his communication equipment and began coordinating a complex rescue operation that involved multiple teams approaching the underground tunnels from different directions. Air support was standing by, and federal agents were moving in to arrest Vincent Blackwood and his remaining associates at their command post. Underground, Thompson and Rodriguez were fighting a running battle through the maze of tunnels as Kane's mercenaries tried to corner them in areas where their superior numbers would provide a decisive advantage. The 2 Marines had managed to slow their pursuers with carefully placed shots and tactical retreats, but their ammunition was running low, and their options were rapidly disappearing. Kane himself was leading the pursuit with the single-minded determination of a professional soldier who had never failed to complete a mission. The former Special Forces operative knew that his employer's freedom and his own future depended on preventing the Marines from escaping with evidence of their illegal activities. This ends here. Marines. Kane's voice echoed through the tunnels as his men closed in on Thompson and Rodriguez's position. You've caused enough trouble for Mr. Blackwood. Surrender now, and I guarantee you'll be treated fairly. Thompson's response was a precisely aimed rifle shot that forced Kane to dive for cover behind a support beam. The only guarantee we need is that Vincent Blackwood will face justice for what he's done, the staff sergeant shouted back. We're United States Marines, and we don't surrender to criminals. The firefight intensified as Kane's mercenaries tried to overwhelm the Marines' defensive position through coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Thompson and Rodriguez used their military training and knowledge of the tunnel layout to maximum advantage. But they were facing overwhelming odds with limited resources. Above ground, Colonel Harrison received word that federal agents had surrounded Blackwood's command post and were moving in for the arrest. The billionaire's criminal empire was finally crumbling, but the outcome of the underground battle would determine whether Thompson and Rodriguez would live to see justice served. Harrison made a decision that put his own career at risk. I'm going down there, he told his team. Rex knows those tunnels better than anyone, and we can use the dog to find Thompson and Rodriguez before Kane's men finish them off. Rex immediately understood what was being asked of him. The German Shepherd had already guided one Marine to safety, and now he was being called upon to return to the dangerous underground maze to help rescue the others. Without hesitation, the loyal dog moved toward the tunnel entrance, ready to risk his life once again for the humans he had been trained to protect. The final phase of the rescue operation was about to begin, with Rex leading Colonel Harrison and his special operations team into the underground battlefield where Thompson and Rodriguez were making their last stand against Kane's mercenaries. The outcome would determine not only the fate of the trapped Marines, but also the success of the entire operation to bring down Vincent Blackwood's criminal organization. The discovery of the Marines' escape sent Vincent Blackwood into a rage that his mercenaries had never witnessed before. The billionaire stood in the empty camp where his prisoners had been held, screaming orders at his men while kicking at the abandoned equipment and supplies. His carefully planned operation was unraveling, and with it, his chances of securing the multi-million-dollar defense contract. Blackwood's security chief, a former Special Forces operative named Marcus Kane, examined the ground around the camp with the methodical precision of an experienced tracker. Kane had worked for the billionaire for 5 years, handling situations that required extreme measures and absolute discretion. He was very good at his job, and he had never failed to complete an assignment. They had help, Kane reported to his furious employer. The escape was too clean, too well planned. Someone provided them with intelligence about our surveillance positions and guided them out of here, without triggering any of our sensors. Blackwood's face turned red with anger. I don't care if they had help from the entire United States Army. Find them, Kane. Find them and bring them back before they can cause any more trouble for my operation. Use whatever resources you need, but get this situation under control. Meanwhile, deep underground, Rex continued to lead the 3 Marines through the maze of tunnels that Colonel Harrison had mapped for their escape route. The German shepherd moved with unwavering confidence, navigating through passages that branched and twisted in directions that would have been impossible for humans to remember. Staff Sergeant Thompson checked the GPS device regularly to track their progress toward the extraction point. According to Harrison's coordinates, they still had several miles to travel through the underground network before reaching safety. The tunnels provided excellent protection from Blackwood's surveillance technology, but Thompson knew that their enemy wouldn't give up the search easily. Corporal Rodriguez had been monitoring the radio frequencies that Blackwood's mercenaries were using, and the intercepted communications painted a disturbing picture. Kane had deployed tracking dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and thermal imaging equipment to locate the underground passages. The mercenaries were systematically searching every cave and tunnel entrance in the area. Private Chen carried the heaviest pack filled with evidence that Colonel Harrison needed to build his case against Blackwood. Documents, photographs, and recorded conversations would prove the billionaire's criminal conspiracy. But only if they could reach the extraction point safely. Rex suddenly stopped in a large underground chamber and began showing signs of agitation that the Marines had learned to interpret as danger warnings. The dog's ears were perked up, and he was staring intently at one of the tunnel entrances they had passed earlier. Something was wrong. Thompson motioned for his men to take defensive positions while he tried to determine what had alarmed their canine guide. The chamber they were in offered multiple escape routes, but Rex seemed hesitant to continue in any direction. The dog's training and instincts were telling him that enemies were nearby. The sound of voices echoing through the tunnels confirmed Rex's warning. Kane and his mercenaries had found their trail and were moving through the underground passages with increasing speed and determination. The voices were still distant, but they were definitely getting closer. We need to move faster, Thompson whispered to his men. Kane's team has dogs of their own and they're gaining on us. Rex seemed to understand the urgency of their situation and began leading them through a series of narrow passages that were barely wide enough for the Marines to navigate with their equipment packs. The dog was taking them deeper underground, following routes that would be difficult for their pursuers to track. The tunnels began to change as they descended further into the earth. The walls showed evidence of old mining operations with rusted equipment and abandoned tools scattered throughout the passages. Support beams had been installed decades earlier to prevent cave-ins, but many of them showed signs of age and deterioration. As they moved through one particularly narrow section, Rodriguez triggered a small rockfall that partially blocked the passage behind them. The noise echoed through the tunnels like gunshots, and Thompson knew that Kane's team would have heard it. Their position was now known, and the chase had become a race against time. Rex led them into a chamber that contained an underground stream, fed by natural springs that kept the water clean and cold. The Marines took advantage of the opportunity to refill their water supplies and rest for a few precious minutes, while their guides scouted the surrounding passages. The sound of pursuit was getting closer. Kane's men were using their own tracking dogs and following the scent trail that the Marines couldn't avoid leaving behind. The mercenaries also had thermal imaging equipment that could potentially detect body heat through thin sections of rock. Thompson made a difficult decision that would test Rex's intelligence and loyalty to the limit. We need to split up, he told his men. Chen, you take the evidence and follow Rex toward the extraction point. Rodriguez and I will create a diversion and try to lead Kane's team away from your trail. Rex seemed to understand the plan immediately. The dog moved to Chen's side and began leading the young Marine toward a passage that angled upward toward the surface. Thompson and Rodriguez gathered equipment that would make noise and leave obvious signs of passage, then headed toward a different tunnel that would take them further away from the extraction point. The diversion worked initially. Kane's tracking dogs picked up the stronger scent trail left by Thompson and Rodriguez, leading the mercenaries away from Chen and Rex. But Kane was too experienced to be fooled for long, and he soon realized what the Marines were trying to accomplish. "Split the team," Kane ordered his men through the radio. "Half of you continue following the main trail. The other half backtrack and search for alternate routes. They're trying to get someone to an extraction point, and we need to stop them before they can make contact with whoever is helping them." Chen found himself alone with Rex in the underground passages, carrying evidence that could destroy Vincent Blackwood's criminal empire. The young Marine had never been in such a high-stakes situation, and he was grateful for the German Shepherd's steady presence and unwavering guidance. Rex led Chen through increasingly complex terrain, always choosing routes that would be difficult for human pursuers to follow quickly. The dog seemed to have an internal map of the entire underground network, never hesitating at intersections or dead ends. Above ground, Blackwood was coordinating the search effort from his command post, using satellite imagery and communication intercepts to track the progress of both his mercenaries and the escaped Marines. The billionaire had too much at stake to allow his prisoners to reach safety and expose his illegal operations. "Find them, Kane," Blackwood growled into his radio. "Find them and eliminate them before they can testify against me. I don't care what it takes or what it costs. This operation cannot be allowed to fail." The underground chase was reaching its climax, with multiple groups moving through the dark passages toward an inevitable confrontation. Rex and Chen were racing toward the extraction point, while Thompson and Rodriguez tried to stay ahead of their pursuers long enough to ensure their teammates' escape. In the darkness beneath the desert, the fate of Colonel Harrison's operation and the future of Vincent Blackwood's criminal enterprise hung in the balance. The German Shepherd had become the key to everything, guiding the Marines through dangers that would have been impossible to navigate without his specialized training and unwavering loyalty. Rex led Colonel Harrison and his special operations team through the underground tunnels, with the same unwavering precision he had shown throughout the entire rescue operation. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that his human companions were in desperate danger, and he moved through the maze of passages with urgent determination. Their sounds of gunfire grew louder as they approached the area where Staff Sergeant Thompson and Corporal Rodriguez were making their final stand against Marcus Kane's mercenaries. Harrison's team moved with the silent efficiency of elite soldiers, using night vision equipment and specialized weapons designed for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Rex suddenly stopped and crouched low, his ears alert to sounds that the humans couldn't detect. The dog had sensed something ahead that made him cautious, and Harrison immediately signaled his team to prepare for contact with enemy forces. Years of working with military dogs had taught the colonel to trust Rex's instincts completely. Through a gap in the tunnel wall, Harrison could see muzzle flashes and hear the distinctive crack of rifle fire echoing through the underground chambers. Thompson and Rodriguez were still fighting, but their defensive position was being slowly overwhelmed by Kane's coordinated assault. The two Marines had managed to hold out longer than anyone could have expected, but their ammunition was nearly exhausted. Harrison divided his team into two groups, using Rex to guide one group through alternate passages while he led the other directly toward the firefight. The plan was to catch Kane's mercenaries in a crossfire that would neutralize their numerical advantage and allow the trapped Marines to escape. Rex performed his role flawlessly, leading 3 special operations soldiers through narrow passages that brought them behind Kane's position without being detected. The German Shepherd's knowledge of the tunnel network had given Harrison's team a tactical advantage that Kane couldn't have anticipated. The rescue operation began with a series of precisely coordinated attacks that caught the mercenaries completely off guard. Harrison's soldiers used flashbang grenades and suppressed weapons to create maximum confusion while minimizing the risk to Thompson and Rodriguez. Within minutes, the balance of the underground battle had shifted dramatically. Kane realized that his position was hopeless when he found himself caught between the Marines he had been pursuing and Harrison's special operations team. The former Special Forces operative was a professional soldier, who understood when a tactical situation had become impossible to salvage. "This is Colonel Harrison, United States Army Intelligence," the officer's voice echoed through the tunnels. "You are surrounded and outgunned. Throw down your weapons and surrender immediately, or face the consequences of resisting federal law enforcement." Several of Kane's mercenaries immediately complied with the surrender order, dropping their weapons and raising their hands above their heads. They had been hired to intimidate Marines and falsify documents, not to fight a pitched battle against elite special operations soldiers in underground tunnels. Kane himself hesitated for a moment before finally laying down his rifle and stepping out from behind his cover with his hands visible. The mercenary leader knew that his employer's arrest meant that any hope of avoiding prosecution had disappeared along with Vincent Blackwood's protection and influence. Thompson and Rodriguez emerged from their defensive position with expressions of relief and gratitude that they struggled to put into words. Both Marines were wounded and exhausted, but they were alive and free. Their courage in refusing to compromise their integrity had finally been vindicated. Rex trotted over to the reunited Marines and allowed them to pet him and express their appreciation for his role in their rescue. The German shepherd had performed his duties with distinction, risking his own life repeatedly to guide them through dangers that would have been impossible to navigate without his specialized training and unwavering loyalty. Above ground, federal agents had successfully arrested Vincent Blackwood at his command post, seizing computers, documents, and communication equipment that provided additional evidence of his criminal conspiracy. The billionaire's protests and threats fell on deaf ears as he was placed in handcuffs and read his rights. The evidence that Private Chen had carried out of the underground tunnels proved to be even more damaging than Colonel Harrison had hoped. Blackwood's own recordings and documents revealed a pattern of corruption, intimidation, and fraud that extended far beyond the immediate incident with the 3 Marines. Federal prosecutors would eventually charge Vincent Blackwood with conspiracy, fraud, extortion, kidnapping, and multiple violations of federal laws governing defense contracts. The billionaire's vast wealth couldn't protect him from the overwhelming evidence of his crimes, and he would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Marcus, Kane and his mercenaries faced charges, ranging from assault and kidnapping to violations of federal laws governing the use of force against military personnel. Their cooperation with federal investigators helped reduce their sentences, but all of them served significant prison time for their roles in Blackwood's criminal enterprise. Thompson, Rodriguez, and Chen received commendations for their courage and integrity in refusing to compromise their duties as United States Marines, despite facing extreme personal danger. Their ordeal in the desert became a case study in military ethics courses, demonstrating the importance of maintaining honor and integrity even in the most difficult circumstances. Colonel Harrison's investigation into defense contract corruption expanded into a broader federal task force that uncovered similar schemes involving other defense contractors. The case became a landmark prosecution that led to significant reforms in the way military contracts were awarded and monitored. Rex received special recognition for his role in the rescue operation, including military honors typically reserved for human personnel. The German Shepherd's performance demonstrated the incredible capabilities of properly trained military working dogs and their value in complex operations requiring intelligence, loyalty, and courage. The 3 Marines returned to their regular duties with a deeper appreciation for the principles they had sworn to uphold, and the knowledge that their refusal to compromise their integrity had helped bring a dangerous criminal to justice. Their experience in the desert had tested their character and proved that honor and duty were more than just words in the Marine Corps creed. Years later, Thompson, Rodriguez, and Chen would remain in contact with Colonel Harrison and make regular visits to see Rex, who had earned a peaceful retirement after his distinguished service. The German Shepherd's courage and intelligence had saved their lives and helped ensure that justice was served against those who thought they could corrupt the military through intimidation and threats. The case of Vincent Blackwood became a reminder that even the wealthiest and most powerful criminals could not escape the consequences of their actions when confronted by individuals with the courage to stand up for what was right, supported by a loyal German shepherd who defied death to ensure that justice prevailed.